Jackson, but before we start off, have you seen the film before?
No, it's my first time seeing it.
So what do you think?
It's a fantastic film.
Yeah.
I'm so moved
Come on,
by
you
this
can
film.
applaud for that.
It's really, no, it's really a huge breakthrough because it's a huge subject, and that there's almost I think you could see this film again and again and again. Because
I've seen it 3 times now. Yeah.
Well, there's so much stuff in here that I didn't know. I'm grateful to find out, but also, so many of these. So many people in this film are people I do know about, but they all deserve, like a deep excavation of our history and our common music.
I wanted to make a film about heroes. I wanted to make a film about these guys that did these amazing things, and not have people leave the theater feeling guilty or bad. I just wanted to celebrate these people. So it was a fine line that Catherine really walked, our director, till we were able to. You get the feeling and you feel the pain. But you also feel the celebration and the power of these people.
We are familiar with the pain, but the thing that surfaces again and again is the joy and the affirmation of life. When you see Pura Fé dropping the needle on the Charlie Patton, it's unbelievable. And I'm a huge fan of Eulalie. They were a trio when I heard them sing first. I think their music has grown, and Pura Fé is certainly. I've heard some of her solo records, and it was so communicative to see that in beautiful face, and that her hearing her own music and that Southeast American Indian music in that blues recording, and her singing back to it in her cadences. It was just. That is my favorite moment in the film. But there are all kinds of. Things I didn't know. For instance, I didn't know about Randy Castillo at all. So I'm really happy to. It's a great movie to see. I hope to see it again.
Well, one of the things that I found very interesting about it, and as someone who used to play in, I probably was the world's worst rhythm guitar player ever in all the shitty punk rock bands I was in. But I love music documentaries. I love music films. But a lot of them follow a pretty traditional trajectory. They start off with a premise, and they talk about this, and they start off. What I loved about this film is you actually saw Wayne Kramer before you saw Charlie Patton. You actually, like a song, there was an intro, there was a verse, there was a chorus, it went back. It moved around so much to show you all the different aspects of this, as opposed to, telling a story. Jackson, I'm sure you guys have all heard the stories, like, blues music was taken by the Brits, sold back to the Americans. That story's been told back and forth, back and forth. It's 2 chess pieces moving across a board. Yeah. This one was more like a tidal stream. And and in fact, one of the things that really struck me about it, and I really hope a lot of people see this, and I remember when I saw it at Sundance, is at one point early on in the film, it's talking about, especially back in the 1880s, it's talking about the morning song. And I feel like in many ways, this is a morning song for a new element of rock and roll. A hidden history that people need to understand the music that they love and where it comes from. And Christina, for you, I wanted to get a sense, because, they call this show business, not show friends, right? So let's be honest. You guys had to get money to make this, and you had to get financing, and you had to make sales. Give a sense a little bit about how you and Stevie sold this film.
Well, first of all, it took 5 years to make. And, we were talking about it earlier, that I feel like I was the eye of the storm, trying to juggle everything and making sure everybody would get along and all the right decisions were made. And it was pretty tough. Selling the film was actually easier than getting it made, so
money was easy. Actually, it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, which was it's unusual, but no, we had a lot of interest right away from all broadcasters, and our company is from Canada, Resolution Pictures, and so we went around at Hot Docs. We brought Stevie there, and Catherine and I, and we just went from all the broadcasters and pitched the film.
Do you guys know what Hot Docs is? Hot Docs is one of the leading documentary festivals. It's held in Toronto
Toronto. In May.
In May every year.
Yep.
We won at Hot Docs this year too. We pitched it at Hot Docs, sold it at Hot Docs, and 5 years later we won at Hot Docs.
Yeah.
Which was kind of cool.
Well, we started off. We sold the film to HBO Canada. Then PBS took it right before going to Sundance. We sold it to Arte in France and Germany. We got a distribution deal with Kino Lorber in the U.S. which led to 80 or 90 theatrical releases across North America. Then we qualified for Oscar, and here we are today in the running for an Academy Award, so it's pretty exciting.
So Stevie, for you, and you tell this story a little bit in the film. You know, you starting out as a young rock and roller, hanging out with George Clinton, hanging out, you know, playing in Philadelphia. You talk about that story with Rod Stewart. You know, you went through the rock and roll dream. You know, you really were at that. But discovering the roots of the music you love, what was that like for you as a process? And what is it like? Almost more importantly, what is it like now? Because now you've shown the film, and I'm sure musicians come up to you, members of the indigenous communities come up to you and say, "Hey, man, like I thought I was the only one."
Yeah. What's really crazy is that so far we haven't got ripped by anybody. Usually in Indian country, somebody hates it, and you got to have problems. But everyone seems to love it, right?
Yeah.
It's
Indian country is very factional. There are a lot of
yeah. So and I was you know, but I was ready for it. I don't know. I just knew that. The early part of my life, I was lucky. I didn't grow up on a reservation. I grew up, my father fought in the Korean War. He settled in Oceanside, California. I grew up surfing every day and playing guitar. I went to LA. I got lucky. I made it pretty fast and went to a gigantic band and went into that stratosphere. When I got to be the end of the 90s, I was spending a lot more time in Indian country, and I just thought to myself that I was watching people bang their head against the wall, trying to find ways to be successful, getting knowledge from people who had no idea what they were talking about. And guys like me or Randy Castillo, or you know, we'd been signed to major labels and we'd toured the world, and so I said I want to go back to Indian country and I want to start trying to help people figure out how to be more successful. And the older I got, the more I got into it, and it's led all the way now to this, where I turned 55 years old the other day, and here I am now, you know, with this film.
You're doing pretty good for 55, Stevie.
Well, the point is I wanted to make a film that would inspire and teach and help people realize that what guys like Jesse Ed and those guys probably had to deal with was a hell of a lot harder than what we'd have to deal with now. And if they could do it, anybody could do it, you know?
And perfect segue, I might add, to talk about one of my all-time favorite guitar players, who, of course, played on one of your albums,
Jesse Ed, yeah. Jesse Ed.
I mean, you talk about it in the film here, about how basically he walked into the room. I mean, maybe you left out he lit a cigarette, but pretty much it seemed to happen in real time to one of the great guitar solos of the early 70s.
Yeah,
what was it like to as a musician?
Well, I knew him. I had met him, and he was really kind to me. And I met him years before I made my first record, and he was just really kind and a good guy and very, you know, fun to be around. And by the time he played on my record, I think he might have been strung out by then. He seemed to want to do it quick because he wanted to cop and go. I think he wanted to get paid and go. And I you know, this is a tragedy, you know, that somebody as talented and as full of creative fire as Jesse Ed Davis went down an addict, you know. And I think it's all too common a story, you know, and it's not limited to, you know, Native Americans. But I tell you what, there are many things that are touched upon in your film that are good jumping off places for other searchers and other films. And one of them would be the environmental racism that has happened in our Native American, on the reservations and in the lands that were allotted. When they wanted their farmland, they pushed them off of farmland, and when they grazing, they finally pushed them, and then there's minerals on it, and now the mining, you know. But I mean, as soon as I see, like, you describing Randy saying, or that guy in the film saying, Randy like something like that, I think, yeah, like what, or John Trudell, what was it that how did they get, what environmental impact, you know, gave them cancer? Where did they grow up around uranium tailings in Mount Taylor? I mean, was he from New Mexico? Because there's a lot of uranium mining in New Mexico. This is a very valuable film. It's very, I'm really grateful to be put in touch with. I mean, I heard Rumble when I was 12. Somebody showed me the how to play it and played me the record, and it was like, anybody could do it. Anybody could play an E chord, could play those two things, but to know how big Link Ray was, I didn't get that. I wasn't really listening to those records when I was 12, and I didn't ever really. So we got this great, portrait of him and his influence on so many of my heroes. So it's a great jumping off place. I think it's a brilliant idea to take it from there. Especially I love what Steven says about it's like an anthem for juvenile delinquency. I mean every little kid's got a little troublemaker inside him.
You got your black leather on right now, buddy.
Yeah, we're rocking that leather.
A lot of people apply to get into the Sundance Film Festival, and in many ways, when you look at it, you think, "Oh, this film is perfect for Sundance." It's where documentaries get a great platform. It's a place where artists can actually tell their stories and tell them in a way that they can get an audience and the media spotlight on them. But give us a sense, like, what is that like? So you hear you're in Sundance, and then you get that call or email, and then what happens?
Well, let me tell you something first. It was like November, and the movie was 3.5 hours long, and we're leaving on vacation. I'll talk to you in January. And then we get she calls and goes, Sundance wants to film. And we're like, what? And we literally had 3 weeks to edit it, and so we couldn't fight. We couldn't argue. We would have screwed it up if we had more time. So the gods took over and edited the film for us and put it in Sundance, and it won, and we didn't have a chance to screw it up. So thank you. That's what happened. I mean, and so it was Sundance for us was a blessing, really.